At Sunday dinner my dad toasted, "To your sister. Our true provider." I smiled, set my fork down and said, "Great. Then she can provide for herself this month. My part ends today." My sister gasped. Mom whispered, "Don't make a scene." I wasn't. I was making an exit. I already knew something was coming. My mom had been acting weirder than usual all day, fluttering around the kitchen like we had royalty coming over. It was just the usual Sunday dinner. Same roast, same forced small talk, same awkward pauses after my sister faked another update about her job hunt. So I sat there sipping wine and waiting for whatever stunt they were about to pull. Dad stood up halfway through the meal. He raised his glass. He does this thing where he thinks he's this wise old patriarch, some head of the family delivering heartfelt toasts like we're in a Hallmark movie. He cleared his throat and looked right at Rachel. "To your sister," he said. "Our true provider." I remember blinking. I actually looked around for a second like maybe there was another sister I didn't know about. Rachel smiled like she'd won something. Like that sentence was an award she'd been patiently waiting for. I looked at her plate, untouched potatoes, 3 bites of meat like always, and then at her nails freshly done. Probably on my dime. I set my fork down and smiled. "Great," I said. "Then she can provide for herself this month. My part ends today." Rachel's mouth dropped open. I think she expected me to laugh after like I was joking. I wasn't. Mom leaned in and whispered, "Don't make a scene." I wasn't. I was making an exit. I picked up my bag and left without looking back. I heard the scrape of someone's chair behind me, but no one followed me out. That's when I knew I'd finally shocked them enough to be silent. Which for my family is rare. Here's what they didn't say at that dinner. Rachel hasn't had a real job in 5 years. Not since college. Everything she's tried has lasted 3 months, tops. And yet somehow she's never short on cash. Because I've been plugging the holes. Rent, car payments, groceries. It started with emergencies. Then turned into habits. My parents helped too, sure, but barely. Their version of helping was calling me and asking if I could just step in this time. Every time. What really got me wasn't the money. It was the lie they were all buying into. That Rachel was trying. That she was in a tough season. That the world just hadn't recognized her talents yet. Well, Rachel didn't want to work. She wanted to be adored for doing nothing, and she was getting exactly that. With interest. I spent the rest of that night sitting in my apartment thinking through the last few years. My bank statements. My calendar. My canceled vacations. My parents' sudden home repairs that turned out to be money for Rachel's credit card bill. Her flight to Tulum last summer. The new mattress she raved about. Also mine. And I let it happen. Because I thought it made me good. Responsible. The one who could carry the weight. But that toast, that stupid smug toast, flipped something. The next morning I got to work. I wasn't angry. I was efficient. First, I transferred the lease on Rachel's apartment into her name. Well, I tried. She hadn't qualified on her own, which is why I had co-signed to begin with. So instead, I submitted a move-out notice to the building and arranged a final inspection. 30 days. That's what they give you. Then I canceled the utilities. All of them. Water, electric, Wi-Fi. Gone. I changed my bank settings to block any auto payments for accounts I didn't recognize. Turns out, Rachel had still been using my Amazon Prime. And my Uber Eats. She was even on my Spotify family plan. She noticed fast. I got a text that afternoon. "Hey, something's wrong with the power here?" I didn't answer. 3 hours later. "Did you cancel the internet? WTF?" Still nothing from me. That night Mom called. Twice. I watched the phone ring. Watched it stop. Watched it start again. By the end of the week, my silence was making more noise than anything I could have said. But I was just getting started. Rachel didn't reach out again after the power went out. Not directly anyway. She switched to posting cryptic Instagram stories. Black screens with captions like, "Some people only love you when you're useful." The kind of stuff that's meant to bait sympathy without naming names. Classic Rachel. She wanted to paint herself as the victim before I even had the chance to open my mouth. I let her. Meanwhile, my parents escalated. Mom left a voicemail pretending nothing was wrong, asking if I'd be coming to church on Sunday. As if I was going to sit next to them like everything was fine. Then she called again the next day crying. Actual sobs. Said I was tearing the family apart. Dad tried a different angle. He sent me a long email with bullet points. Like a business proposal. It outlined all the unseen ways Rachel contributed to the family. Apparently her presence was emotionally valuable. Apparently her creative spirit inspired us all. I wish I were kidding. He used phrases like emotional labor and non-monetary contributions. But there was. Written out like it was fact. Rachel was a provider. because she gave them a reason to keep hoping she'd change. The worst part, they really believed it. They'd built their whole narrative around Rachel being special. Since we were kids, she was the one with potential. I was the one with discipline. Translation: she was adored for existing, I was tolerated for producing. When I got straight A's, they said I was responsible. When Rachel turned in a half-finished art project, they said she was gifted. When I bought my first car, they told me not to rub it in. When Rachel crashed hers, they said she was going through a rough time. That dynamic didn't end when we grew up. It just got more expensive. A week after the dinner, Rachel finally texted again. This time she tried sweet. Hey, I know you're upset, but can we talk? I didn't answer. An hour later. I don't know what I did to deserve this. That one made me laugh. I almost typed out a list. But no. I had a better idea. I called the storage unit she was using. It was under my name. I had paid the deposit monthly for almost 2 years. It was where she kept her art supplies. Mostly unopened paints and a bunch of half-broken furniture she said she was refurbishing for resale. I shut it down. Told them to toss whatever was still there if she didn't come get it in a week. I waited. 3 days later, she showed up at my place. Unannounced. Buzzed the intercom over and over like a child throwing a tantrum. I didn't let her in. She stood outside for maybe 20 minutes. I watched from my window as she paced, yelled into her phone, probably calling our parents, and finally stormed off. That night, Mom called again. I let it ring. Then she texted me. You're being cruel. Family is everything. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back. Then you and Dad can start treating Rachel like family, not a fragile little queen who needs constant tribute. I'm out. For real this time. She didn't reply. A few days later, I got a call from Rachel's landlord. Apparently, she hadn't been paying her half of the rent. The half I was no longer covering. He was considering eviction. I gave him a simple answer. Not my problem. That was the first time I said those words out loud. It felt like breathing fresh air after years in a stuffy room. By week 3, everything started caving in. Not for me. For them. Rachel had gone quiet, suspiciously quiet. No texts. No missed calls. No fake apologies or just checking in messages. That's how I knew she was spiraling. She only ever disappeared when she was too embarrassed to ask for help directly, or when she was busy fabricating a version of the story where she was the victim and I was the cold, heartless villain. Meanwhile, Mom was on a campaign tour, calling extended family, family friends, anyone who'd listen. She spun it like I was going through something. Claimed I'd been under a lot of stress at work, said I wasn't myself lately. The irony of her blaming it on my career, the same career they'd been milking for years, wasn't lost on me. My cousin Jenna sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post my mom made. Just a photo of Rachel sitting in their backyard with a cup of tea and some caption about having your children close no matter what. I didn't even react. I'd wasted years explaining things. Years justifying. I was done writing footnotes for my boundaries. That same week, I got an email from a property management company. Apparently, Rachel had listed me as a reference for a rental application. Bold move. They asked for verification of her employment and income. I replied, I can't verify anything. She's not employed and I'm not financially connected to her in any way. She didn't get the place. That's when the spiral went public. Rachel posted a 7-slide Instagram story, black background, white text, about the people you trust the most being the first to cut you loose. It was vague enough to keep her dignity but detailed enough that everyone knew it was about me. Slide 5 was the kicker. Something about being forced to rebuild from the ground up because of betrayal. I was almost impressed. She made financial consequences look like emotional abuse. But what really sent things into motion was the car. Rachel didn't have one anymore. The one she'd been using was technically Dad's second car, which she'd borrowed indefinitely. She backed it into a mailbox 2 days after moving home. The neighbor threatened to file a report. No insurance. Rachel hadn't even updated the registration, so the ticket from 2 towns over had racked up late fees. Dad was livid, not that he would ever yell at her directly. Instead, he called me. Left a voicemail. Said, your sister's accident is going to cost us thousands, Emily. We can't float this right now. I think it would be good for the family if you stepped in. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. The nerve. I didn't call him back. Dad, I blocked him. That was the first time I'd ever blocked my dad. There wasn't even an argument. Just a clean break. 2 days later, Mom emailed me. No greeting. No fluff. We're doing our best. Rachel is trying. You've made your point. Can we move past this? I stared at the email for a full minute, then archived it. They didn't get it. They still thought this was some tantrum. A fit I'd eventually apologize for. They thought if they just waited long enough I'd go back to normal. The problem was this was normal now. For the first time in years I wasn't tired. I wasn't stressed, overdraft, or stretched thin. I was fine. Better than fine. Rachel wasn't. The day after the email I got a message from her ex, Evan. We hadn't spoken in almost a year, but he reached out with one sentence. Is she okay? Apparently Rachel had shown up at his place crying, saying she had nowhere to go. Claimed I'd ruined her life. Said I'd cut her off without warning and sabotaged her chances of moving forward. He asked if that was true. I told him he could believe whatever he wanted, but I was done explaining myself to people who only called me when Rachel showed up in shambles. He replied, I figured. Just wanted to check. The house was starting to feel it too. My cousin Jenna visited my parents the following weekend and texted me afterward. She's treating the place like a hotel. I think your mom's starting to break. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. I knew what was happening. Rachel wasn't cute anymore. Not when she was slamming doors and blaming everyone. Not when she was eating through groceries, asking for rides, taking 2-hour showers, and still somehow recovering from everything life had done to her. It was only a matter of time. They'd all built her a castle and now she was setting fire to the furniture. I sat back and watched the smoke rise. Week 4 and I was already hearing things from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Apparently Rachel had started calling around. Old friends, classmates, even a girl she used to babysit for. She told them she'd been temporarily displaced and was starting over after a betrayal. That phrase kept popping up, after a betrayal. Like she was a war refugee. I wasn't surprised. She'd always been good at rewriting history. What did surprise me was who showed up at my office. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was in a meeting when the front desk pinged me and said someone named Marissa was waiting. Marissa, as in Rachel's friend from high school. The one she used to party with, the one I caught stealing a pair of earrings from my room when they both crashed at my apartment years ago. I hadn't seen her since. I walked out already annoyed. She smiled like we were old pals and asked if we could talk in private. She sat across from me in the break room and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a GoFundMe summary. For Rachel. Marissa said Rachel wasn't eating. That she was struggling. That the family was cutting her off emotionally and financially. Then she leaned in and said the words that made me blink. She told me you were having a breakdown. That's why you're acting like this. I just stared at her. Rachel hadn't just painted me as cold. She told people I was mentally unwell. That I needed help. That I was taking things out on everyone because of work pressure. That I'd always been jealous. Marissa asked if I could consider sharing the fundraiser on my socials. Said it might mean something coming from me. I stood up. Said the conversation was over. And walked her out of the building without another word. That night I looked up the fundraiser. She titled it Fresh Start for a Survivor. She wrote this entire sob story about losing her home, being abandoned by her only sibling and needing help to rebuild. There were even pictures. One of her sitting on a park bench with a blanket over her lap. One of a torn backpack and a spilled makeup bag. It was performance art. She'd raised $672. I recognized 2 of the names, people from my college. People she hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't touch the fundraiser. I didn't report it. I just screenshotted and saved it. I was collecting pieces now. Letting her build the narrative while I quietly filed the receipts. Then came the email. From my parents' lawyer. A short, sterile message. Requesting discussion about shared property, future financial contributions and family support obligations. I read it twice. There was no lawsuit. No threats. Just a polite little suggestion that we clarify expectations. That's when I knew, my parents weren't just flailing, they were scared. They'd built their safety net with my salary. Credit cards, refinancing, quiet little cash infusions that kept the house running while they played pretend. They never said it outright, but I could see the shape of it now. Retirement was a fantasy. Dad's investments had dried up. Mom's savings were probably in Rachel's closet, hanging off designer hangers. I didn't respond to the lawyer. I called the bank instead. Removed my name from the shared emergency account they opened, just in case years ago. The one I'd been quietly refilling when bills ran tight. Then I took it a step further. I requested an audit of all payments made from that account in the last 5 years. It was worse than I thought. Hotel stays. Personal shopping. An Uber to a spa. They'd used the emergency fund like a personal debit card. Most of the charges were under Rachel's name. That night I sat in my apartment with every light off. Just silence. I wasn't even angry anymore. I felt like someone finally snapped the last piece of tape holding together a painting that had been falling off the wall for years. And then, this part still doesn't feel real. Rachel's ex, Evan, called me again. He said Rachel had shown up at his door. Not crying. Not panicking. Laughing. She'd read the email from the lawyer and thought it meant I was folding. She said, "You'll come back once you realize no one believes you." I don't know what she expected me to do with that. I thanked him for the call, hung up, and booked a flight to Arizona. No one knew I was going. No one knew why. But my parents were about to find out. Because that house they lived in, the one they told everyone they'd bought in cash, it was in my name. And I was done letting tenants trash the place. The house in Arizona was a gift. That's what they called it back when things were still polite. It had been my idea to buy it. Not for me, for them. A way to secure the future, as Dad put it. I was 26, flush with my first six-figure bonus, and still naive enough to believe that love could be measured in down payments. We drew up the paperwork together. I covered the mortgage. They were supposed to handle the taxes and upkeep. They said they'd pay me back. They never did. I hadn't been back to the house in almost 4 years. It looked smaller now. The paint was peeling at the corners. The front lawn had patches of dead grass. The Arizona sun, as they used to call it so proudly, had worn down everything except the fake charm. I stood in the driveway and pulled out the key. I'd never given up. They were inside eating breakfast. I heard Rachel before I saw her. Something about almond milk being too corporate. My mom was standing at the stove, her back to the door. Dad was at the table, half asleep with his tablet open. No one noticed me until I shut the door behind me. Rachel turned around, a spoon in her hand. Froze. Mom jumped. "Emily." I didn't let her finish. I set the folder down on the counter. The one with the deed. With my name. With the dates. The payment logs. The full breakdown of every cent I'd spent since the day they moved in. Dad stood up, his hand hovering over his mug. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller. Rachel stayed seated. I told them this wasn't a conversation. This wasn't a negotiation. I was here to inform them that they had 30 days to vacate the property. Mom started crying. Dad kept asking if this was a joke. Rachel just laughed and said, "You wouldn't." I looked at her and said, "I already did." That's when she stood up, threw her spoon in the sink, stormed off down the hallway like she was still 13. I heard a door slam. Mom whispered something under her breath. I didn't care. I handed Dad a copy of the eviction paperwork. Told him the formal notice would come through the mail. That I'd already spoken to a property manager. That locks would be changed in 31 days whether or not they were ready. Then I walked out. No threats. No shouting. Just facts. On the flight home I slept like a child. Over the next week the messages escalated. Mom called every night, alternating between begging and raging. Dad sent me long paragraphs that read like speeches. Rachel, in a new twist, posted a YouTube video titled, "When Your Own Blood Betrays You." I didn't watch it, but it showed up on my feed because someone tagged me in the comments. She'd gone full influencer. In the video thumbnail she was crying. 10 days before the move-out deadline I got a call from the property manager. Rachel had tried to claim she was a tenant with squatter's rights. She wasn't. Her name had never been on anything. He said she threatened to call the police. I told him to let her. Everything was legal. A few days later a friend from high school messaged me. She said Rachel had started DMing people we used to know, accusing me of elder abuse. Said I was leaving our parents homeless. Said she was considering legal action. I laughed. Then I forwarded the message to my attorney. That same night Rachel texted me. A single line. "You win. Hope it was worth it." It was. It still is. By the time the lockbox was installed on the front door they were gone. Movers came. I didn't ask where they went. I didn't need to know. The house is mine again now. I'm turning it into a rental. All their junk? Donated. The wine rack? The fake plants and cracked dishes and the ceramic angel Mom kept near the sink. All of it gone. And for the first time in my adult life I had no one pulling from my account. No one asking for just a little help. No one pretending I owed them something because we shared blood. I wasn't done cutting ties. But I was close. The last message I ever got from my mother came on a Thursday evening. No greeting, no signature, just this. "One day you'll understand. When everyone leaves you, family will be all that's left. Don't come back then." There was no weight to it anymore. She had said some version of that line my entire life. But she never understood what it actually meant to leave. What it meant to choose peace over proximity. What it felt like to finally be done. By then Rachel had already moved in with some guy she met at a bar. Someone with a neck tattoo and a handlebar mustache, who filmed skate videos for content. My cousin Jenna sent me a screenshot of Rachel's latest story. A grainy mirror selfie caption, "Starting from scratch never scared me. I was born to rebuild." I didn't even flinch. She wasn't rebuilding. She was hiding. Jumping from one enabler to the next. She always found someone to carry the weight she refused to lift. My parents. They landed in a guest room at Dad's cousin's house. One shared bathroom. No cable. My aunt said Mom had been quiet lately, which was code for miserable. Dad was working part-time at some local shop. They hadn't told anyone the real story. Just said they were restructuring finances. I let them keep the lie. I didn't care. What I cared about was my silence, how powerful it had become. They couldn't guilt-trip it. They couldn't manipulate it. They couldn't twist it into something selfish or dramatic. It was just silence. Permanent, untouchable, clean. Over the next month I finished cutting the threads. I got a new phone number. New accounts. I changed emergency contacts at work. Removed every old login that still connected us. From streaming services to cloud storage to that one airline account we all used to share. I even scrubbed the old family photos from my social media. Not out of bitterness but clarity. They didn't represent anything anymore. They were like movie stills from a film I no longer wanted to be cast in. The only people who had my new number were the ones who'd never asked me for anything I didn't want to give. There were no final confrontations. No screaming voicemails. Just an echo that gradually faded out. One night Jenna and I got drinks and she looked at me across the table and said, "You really did it, huh?" I asked what she meant. "You really cut them off. All of them. Like, totally." I nodded. I didn't explain. She didn't ask for one. The truth is I don't check in. I don't wonder. I don't worry about Rachel anymore. I don't feel responsible for what happens to that house of cards now that I'm not holding it up. Maybe someday one of them will try again. Send a letter. A voicemail. An apology, real or not. Maybe they'll wait for some big life event, thinking that's when I'll fold. A birthday. A death. They'll wait a long time. But as I meant it. I don't want contact. Not in 6 months. Not in 5 years. Not when Rachel finally runs out of people to use. Not when my mom needs someone to take her to appointments. Not when my dad wants to sit me down for a talk about how things got so far. I'm not angry anymore. But I am done. And if they ever find themselves at my door again, it won't be locked out of malice. It'll be locked because I've already left. And I'm not coming back.